Howdy, historians. Getting back into the Great Depression here. Today we're going to talk about opponents of the New Deal in this part of the Flip Lesson. And then we'll have one more section left where it's life for Americans during the Great Depression. One quick thing while I'm going full screen here, I want to make one little correction from the previous video when we were talking about the second phase of the New Deal. Second phase of the New Deal was during the second half of FDR's first term. Okay, so the first New Deal is like the first 100 days. That's basically 1932, 1934. Second New Deal, 1935, 1936. All right, and then you saw a couple of things happen in the... Oh, come here, buddy. You want to say hi? Come here. Oh, no, you don't want to say hi today? Okay. Joey, come here. What's this? What is this? Dolphin. Yeah, Joey just brought me a dolphin sticker. Good spin, buddy. So yeah, first New Deal, 1932 to 1934, we can say. Second New Deal, 1935, 1936. Last phase of the New Deal, 1937 to 1938. Remember, the Fair Labor Standards Act is really the last big one. And then we wrapped up talking about Keynesian economics. So just want to give that little fix, that little disclaimer before we hop into it here today. Let's see what else. Joy just brought me a little pizza truck. All right, what else? What else? Okay, we got a boat, all kinds of good stuff. All right, so today I want to talk about opponents of the New Deal. There's some specific people, and then Joey's pressing buttons on my computer. We'll see how this goes. And then there's also just like some general ideas about who the opponents of the New Deal were. So like there's groups and organizations, there are specific people, and then there's just kind of like more general groups and organizations that are against the New Deal. All right, so first off, we've got some liberal critics, socialists, extreme liberals, people who felt really that the New Deal did not go far enough, right? Socialists want to see just the straight up institutionalization and use of socialism. All right, you've got people who are on more of the liberal side of the political scale who feel that the New Deal did too much for business and not enough to help the unemployed and the working poor. And there were some legitimate arguments to that, but when you look at it, I think there was a pretty good balance struck in the New Deal of not going too far left or too far right and really just focusing on the 3 R's that FDR talked about. Their criticism was really most accurate and loudest during the first New Deal, but then as the first New Deal and the second New Deal really started to kick in and work, a lot of the liberal critics became a little quieter. But they also said ethnic minorities, women, and the elderly were somewhat overlooked. Now, after the Social Security Act, you can't say that the elderly are being overlooked, but women and minorities largely were. FDR had, his brain trust. Excuse me. He had a lot of, well, some minorities in there, more than any president ever had before, and he had minority advisors that he met with, also kind of on the down low in what people called his kitchen cabinet. But the New Deal kind of was like the progressive reform, where they're trying to focus on things that are going to help everybody, not specific groups, but minorities definitely need some more help, as did women. But there's critics on the left that are saying, really, the New Deal doesn't do enough. Now, for the conservative critics, you're going to have just the general group of conservatives and business leaders. All right, they are more numerous than the critics on the left. All right, so the conservative critics on the right are more numerous and in greater number than the liberal critics on the left. And they really argued that the New Deal programs gave the federal government too much power. And some of these acts bordered on socialism. Sometimes the word communism would get thrown out there because there's no better way to get people riled up in the United States of America than just calling something communist, right? And we talked about some of the pieces of New Deal legislation did look very socialist. The TVA looked very socialist, and so did the National Recovery Administration, right? That was another one we talked about, where those two did look very, very socialist. So there were some legitimate complaints here from business leaders and conservatives who thought that these things were going too far. Business leaders are alarmed over a lot of things in the New Deal. Increased regulations, the second New Deal's pro-union stance, financing of government programs through borrowed money. Remember, we talked about Keynesian economics. So these people were upset about the growth of the power of labor, growth of the power of the federal government, and kind of some of the socialist tendencies, right? The Social Security Act is very socialist too. We're taxing people to create a social security net for people to fall into, so they always have a pension built in. Now, the conservative critics formed an organization called the American Liberty League. The American Liberty League was there to fight New Deal legislation, and its stated goal was to, quote, stop the New Deal from subverting the U.S. economic and political system. So they're trying to prevent change, right? They're conservative, remember, conservation, trying to go back to a previous state. They're trying to conserve the previous balance of power and structure in American government and economics. And in the political system, during the Great Depression, I think there has to be some shifting, and there was. But there were definitely some very legitimate complaints from both sides here. Now, when we look at specific people, there's these group of people called demagogues. All right, a demagogue is a political leader who gains power by appealing to people's emotions, instincts, and prejudices in a way that's considered manipulative or dangerous. All right, so a demagogue, someone who gains political power by appealing to people's emotions, instincts, and prejudices in a way that is considered manipulative and or dangerous. So probably the best known demagogue in history is Adolf Hitler, right? He absolutely appeals to people's racial prejudices and their emotions and instincts. So you hear a lot of like emotional, vague arguments from demagogues instead of specific plans and actions from demagogues. So there's a few different people here. There's three of them that I want to take a look at. The first here in the upper left is where we are going to start. This guy is Father Charles Coughlin. All right, he wants to inflate the money, inflate our currency, and nationalize banks. He had a group called the National Union for Social Justice. They want to inflate the currency and nationalize all banks. He's a Catholic priest, and he used the radio much like FDR did to broadcast his message out to the people. And he wants to inflate the currency so there's more money available, so that way people can have more cash in their pocket. All right, obviously, this is a short-sighted solution that isn't real. This is appealing to people's emotions and instincts. Hey, having more money is a good thing. Well, the value of that money is going to go nowhere. This is around the time they're trying this in Germany, and it's having terrible problems. And then he says banks are the problem. They're the main cause for why we got in this mess. So if we nationalize the banks and put them under government control, everything's going to be fixed, right? Another thing you see with these demagogues is overly simplistic solutions to overly complex problems. So he says all we need to do is print more money, nationalize the banks, everything's going to be fixed. All right, so he's talking about this a lot in his radio broadcast. However, his attacks against the New Deal and his critique of how the government was handling the Great Depression increasingly became anti-Semitic and very fascist until eventually he was ordered by the Catholic Church to stop his radio broadcast, and he was shut down. Because as he started to attack banks, he started to say that this was, the entire Depression was just a plot by Jewish bankers to destroy the United States of America, and that what we really needed was a strong national leader, and we should kind of do away with some of our democracy. And the Catholic Church said, okay, that's enough, and they shut him down. This fellow over here is Dr. Francis Townsend. He wanted to see the Social Security program go into place. Now, this is something that eventually is going to happen. He proposed a 2% federal sales tax that would be used to create a specific fund. And then every retired person over the age of 60 would get $200 a month from that fund. That's the modern equivalent of like just a little less than $4,000, which is way more than you get from Social Security typically. And then he believed that people are going to take this money, go out, spend it, and stimulate the economy. So this one isn't as bad. He's not as demagogue-y as some of the other guys. He's not appealing to prejudice, but it is pretty overly simplistic. He said this is all you needed. Social Security was going to fix everything. There's a lot more going on in the Great Depression, as we know from all those causes that we saw. Social Security isn't the only answer. But eventually, he won the support of millions through this, and eventually we did see the Social Security Act go in with some tweaks to how he did it, 65 instead of 60, a lower monthly payment. But what's interesting, this is the first time really in American politics that we see a direct appeal to the elderly, where all of a sudden we're starting to realize there's a lot of power in this very large group of people, an aging population that is retiring and votes. Right? That's why the older segments of the American population are so well represented in the government, and their issues are so well championed by politicians because they vote a lot. This was the first time we saw an appeal to the elderly. Now, the most dangerous of these guys is the last one down here. This is Huey Long. They called him the Kingfish. Huey Kingfish Long. All right. This guy is a governor from Louisiana. He is the governor of Louisiana, I should say. He had this program called the Share Our Wealth program, Share the Wealth program. All right. And he won immense popularity with this Share the Wealth program, Share the Wealth idea. What he proposed was a minimum income for every person in the United States by taxing the wealthy. All right. So he attacks the wealthy. He says the Great Depression is really just the total fault of the wealthy, of the bankers, of the business class, of the stockbrokers. America's in this situation not because of the good, hardworking people of the United States, but because of the greedy, deceitful, lying bankers and big business and wealthy. So he wants to tax the wealthy very heavily and then give everyone in the United States a minimum income. At this time, he said he wanted it to be $5,000. Modern equivalent of that is about $92,000, a little more than $92,000, which is more than the average family of four makes in the United States today. Last year in Wisconsin, the average family of four had a take-home salary combined of all the income of like $72,000, right? So this would be a lot of money. And also, it's total bunk math. Like, he had no real math or research or facts to back this program up that it would work. It's just an idea he threw out there. And of course, it's going to make him super popular because everyone's like, oh, minimum national salary. We all get it no matter what. Absolutely, we're going to want this. Tax the wealthy. They're the ones that got us into this, of course. And he started to be really dangerous. He bordered on starting class warfare in the United States. But he was also very, very popular. He was incredibly popular in Louisiana. He was also incredibly corrupt. There's some really good documentaries and movies out there. There's a great movie just called The Kingfish about his life. This guy's cheating on his wife left and right. He's embezzling tax money. He ran Louisiana like a king. He did whatever he wanted. He's constantly lying to the people of Louisiana. He's always throwing out these overly simplistic solutions to these overly complex problems. Whenever someone kind of calls him on it, he says, oh, you're just an agent of the wealthy. You're just someone who's trying to pull down the American man and the people. I'm the one working for them. You're not. I mean, this guy was pretty dangerous. And then he announced in 1935 that he was going to run for president. And a lot of people liked him, right? This is when things get dangerous in a time of economic depression and recession, is when someone like this gets popular and has an overly simplistic idea that's going to solve these complex problems, right? We can reference Hitler again, right? All we need to do is take control of the banks, take power away from the Jews, and Germany's going to be okay again. We all know where that went, right? Kingfish Huey Long says all we need to do is basically institute socialism, tax the wealthy, give everybody money, everything's going to be okay, don't ask me about how I'm going to do it. So he announced a run for president in 1935, but he was killed by an assassin on September 8th of 1935. So a year before the presidential election, he's assassinated in the state capitol in Louisiana. He's shot. And there's a lot of shadiness around his assassination too. People were terrified of him. There's an early FBI right now. Maybe the government killed Huey Long, but that's something you guys can check out. But this guy was dangerous, right? So there's specific groups, there's specific people that oppose the New Deal. The last group is the Supreme Court, right? The Supreme Court did a fantastic job at this time of being a check and balance against, the power of Congress and against FDR. Right, so remember, there were a few different pieces of legislation that the Supreme Court ruled unconstitutional. The National Recovery Administration, the Agricultural Adjustment Administration, parts of the Tennessee Valley Authority will also be ruled unconstitutional. So the Supreme Court was an opponent of the New Deal and really just did a good job, actually, of checking the power of Congress at this time and checking the power of FDR. Now, this eventually gets FDR in some hot water. In 1937, he proposed a bill called the Court Reorganization Act. What it really was a court packing scheme. He wanted to add Supreme Court justices. He proposed that a president would be able to add a Supreme Court justice for each current justice who was over the age of 70 and a half. It would have allowed FDR to add 6 more Supreme Court justices to the Supreme Court, and then he'd be able to pack it with people that would support his plan. The reaction to this across the aisle was very negative, and it tarnished FDR's legacy. but eventually World War II is going to kick up pretty quick, and then he's not going to have to worry too much about his legacy being tarnished by this.